Since time immemorial, Native people have lived, traveled, and traded in the Puget Sound region. The Donation Land Act of 1850, to encourage western expansion, allowed American settlers to claim these traditional native lands. The explosion of immigration into the region that followed forced the United States government into a fraught treaty-making process with local tribes. The original terms of the Medicine Creek Treaty were inadequate and ultimately unacceptable by tribal leaders, resulting in war. The award-winning Indigenous Voices podcast is an extension of the Puget Sound Treaty War Panel Series and of Fort Nisqually Living History Museum. The podcast advances tribal voices in the telling of Puget Sound history and shares tribal knowledge and expertise for wider audiences.
Fort Nisqually Living History Museum acknowledges that we operate on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup and Nisqually tribes, and on lands with deep significance to other Coast Salish tribes. Coast Salish people have lived on and stewarded these lands since time immemorial and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step toward true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond.
Hello, my name is Warren King George. I'm an enrolled member of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe on my father's side, and on my mother's side, I descend from the Upper Skagit tribe.
Nettsie Bullchild, Nisqually Indian tribe, Director of Archives and Tribal Historic Preservation Office, tribal member, and tribal elder.
Haslachel, Togalapo, Deisha, Desiyaya Chulup, Brandon Reynon Titsta, Spoilapups Chud, Duflalut Debati, Director / THPO. My name is Brandon Reynon. Welcome. I am the Director and THPO for the Puyallup Tribe of Indians. I'm also a Puyallup tribal member.
Haslachel, Takablu Sitsta, Puyallup Ops Chud. Good day, my name is Takablu. I'm from the Puyallup tribe. My English name is Amber Taylor. I am the daughter of Eric Bennett and Carol Taylor, the granddaughter of Ramona Bennett, Clyde Bill, Patricia Taylor, and Al Taylor.
I'm Dalton Fry. My current position is the Director of Natural Resources for the Cowlitz Indian tribe.
Throughout history, traditional native lands have been reduced through governmental actions, such as the 1854 Medicine Creek Treaty and the 1887 General Allotment Act, which forced local tribes to relocate to new lands that were ill-suited for survival. In this episode, participants discuss the cultural importance of natural resources, the history of these lands, and what tribes are doing to preserve cultural practices and reclaim land back while adjusting to changing environments and industries.
Where it's currently at was not where it was at in the first place. So it does make a difference on what was happening there. So when they established Fort Nisqually, it was a trading fort. It wasn't a military fort. So there was already trading there by the tribes, at that area. So that's why they set it up. Fort Nisqually set it up there also. But there were already tribal members there living at the original site. When the different officers came in, they tried to move it, but it didn't happen because they found out a lot of the tribes that were coming to Fort Nisqually wouldn't go to the other sites. So they ended up keeping the fort where it was. Not only from the fort where they repatriated, but, along Sequalichu Creek, that area down towards the beach. So all along there, they were finding burial sites because of all the tribal people that lived along that area, not just where the fort was at now, but other sites. So it's a very sacred site to me because of all the ancestors that were there. They did have to bury them alongside the soldiers and that were at the fort also because of all the changing with where they were at, because a lot of the tribal people worked there or lived outside of that area, or outside of the fort. So there was that mix when they did the archaeological site or dig there. And when Cecilia went there, if you go further back into DuPont, there was a time limit on the dig, but she had told them that there's more, but they would have to do more surveys. And the tribes were really kind of against it because they didn't want people coming in and knowing where these burials were. So, but that's what she was always concerned about in her reports, that there's more there. There were more burials. In the long, what they called the longhouses back then, they thought these were village sites, but they were actually just a family unit with extended family members. They all lived in the one house. So to a non-tribal person, that's what they would have thought is, oh, we went onto this, this longhouse. This was a village. So, but it was just a part of a bigger village, but this family chose to live there. And so at the site, that's what they were called. So non-tribal people came in and said, oh, there's a band of Indians or Sequalichu, but not knowing that this was just a family unit and there were other areas where there was homes. It was that same thing. These were families. So they kind of thought, oh, there's a band over there or there's a village over there. But it's hard to say because they were just extended families. It was appealing only because it was a trading center for a lot of the tribes from, different places came. So that's where they chose to come and trade. And so that's why a lot of these forts, and I'm just going to spit it out here, a lot of the forts were put where tribal people were for trading, for whatever and that's where they set up, a lot of these forts. Because like I said, a lot of them weren't military forts, they were trading forts. And then once they set up, then they developed the land. The land, it was prairie beside the water. But after they came in, then that's when they fenced, they built, like we were talking the other night about, they brought in all their animals, so it became a whole different site from what the tribe used it for.
When we first started our program here, the preservation program in Muckleshoot in the year 2000, I remember doing a project with the late Isidore Tom. It was a repatriation project about some ancestors that were rediscovered in DuPont, Washington. But it was an interesting project because of its location right next to I-5. I mean, these individuals were buried. Their historical and traditional area had to have been DuPont. I think if I recall, there were 5 or 6 ancestors that were repatriated and reclaimed from the city of DuPont.
Depending on what side we're talking about, original or current. The current one, that's Puyallup territory. And so it's kind of interesting that you have the two dynamic here. So for that question, you have the Puyallup and Nisqually would be the DuPont wasn't very far from Tacoma. So, just looking at the landscape that we had here at Puyallup, I mean, you had everything you could really want for most of the year. All your roots for medicines, all your the natural beauty. I mean, even today, when we're here in the summertime, this is the most perfect place to live in at least all the country. Now, I've lived on both sides of both coasts and in the middle too. So in the summertime, this is perfect around here. You have plenty of game. You have plenty of berries. All everything you need for nutrient, anything for having a civilization is here. Water, fresh water, salt water, fish, wild game, wild berry, roots, herbs everywhere. Like I said, most of the year. And then it's in such abundance, we're able to store for the lean years, which would be in about, traditionally, or I should say probably February, March, it started to get a little lean, but then everything started coming back, and so as long as you can make it through February and March, you're generally pretty good. So, I mean, the populations were here, the people were here. I always get a kick out of the ethnographers early on, like Vancouver and such. You just said, this is a wide open, virgin land, no one's here, but yet then they have to establish a trading post and put up a fort to keep the Indians out, so to keep the non-existent Indians out of their little area. But it was just a beautiful place to live, and we had plenty of food to eat. And so, think about what they contrast that with the East Coast, or especially the Midwest, where it's all desert, barren, not a whole lot to eat. This would have been a prime place to come and live.
Back then, everything was by canoe, before the horses came in. So you set up your homes by the water because that's pretty much how you traveled. That's how you did everything. So they also had the cedar trees, which, provided for the canoes and the homes in that area. So that's why there were, some of these were set up there because of that's all they used was canoes back then.
I'm not a water person, but so I don't know personally the benefits of it, but I know the science, some of the science behind it. The currents were able to, we followed the currents, and so along with the currents, followed all the fish and all the different sea resources too. So so just having the currents available, you lived along those currents where the current took you, and so we kind of see that Colvis Passage between Vashon and the peninsula. There's just not a whole lot of villages there. It's always perplexed me, like how come there's just not a whole lot of villages? And it was a tribal elder who said, "Well, yeah, the current goes the wrong way." I'm like, "Oh shoot, all right, well that makes sense. Why would you go against the current when you got plenty of land all with the current to build your places to live and to establish your families and your villages?" So I think having those big currents was definitely beneficial.
That area is definitely unique. You can tell by simply driving the I-5 corridor and just peering out your window as you're traveling 70 miles an hour, or depending on what traffic is like, you might be stuck in traffic in that area today. But as you look around, you can clearly see the habitat is unique and very defined. Prairie habitat, everything from the oak trees to the camas that you can see during April and May and even June. You can see those beautiful purple flowers. That landscape is a good way to understand why people would choose to live there. And it's not because of, like you heard earlier, it's not because of the view. It's not because of the real estate value. It's because of the cultural value, the value that Mother Nature provides for survival. It's the food, it's the menu items that are there, the medicinal plants and the spiritual places that were once there. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's not taught in curriculums. That's not part of the curriculum in public education. It's not part of science and biology and history and social issues, although it should be. What Muckleshoot's connection to that area, if the listeners are familiar with our very first episode, the Medicine Creek Treaty War, that's what area what is ideal for making that connection to the local tribes. This area was vast prairie lands. It was a network of prairie lands, so that were managed and maintained historically and traditionally, and using fire and using harvest techniques that would help promote specific prairie plants to grow. These plants were ideal. They were integral in people that called this place home. These plants help define our culture. They help define our traditional diets, and they help define who we are and where we come from. And I think it's important that the listeners that they understand that when we're talking about prairies, vast prairies that once existed, and now in this day and age, in the year 2026, we as natives are restricted and sometimes even turned away from accessing places and locations like this that help define who we are and where we come from. And so it's really an interesting conundrum. People want to acknowledge natives, and some people are learning more about natives and their history and their legacies and the role that we play here in the Pacific Northwest. Well, we talked about food a little bit in the first podcast, but that's a category I think that falls right in the lap of this topic about identity and why would you live there. It's because of the traditional foods. And Muckleshoot is no different from any other village. We enjoy the generous camas that grow there. We enjoy the wild blackberries. They're unique, and there's plenty of them. It's part of the characteristic of the DuPont area.
I'm Dalton Fry. My current position is the Director of Natural Resources for the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. I've worked for in the Natural Resource Department for the tribe for the last 14 years. So came up as a scientific technician and then became the lands manager for the tribe, and now am the Director of Natural Resources. So trade was the central. There was a trail that came from Cowlitz country to the south that we like to refer to as the Cowlitz Trail, which is kind of where I-5 is today, connected us up as a trade route up to that area. And there were vast prairies pretty much all the way from once you left the Cowlitz River all the way along that trail and that path up to the point of trade. I think that was the Cowlitz's connection, as we were kind of, more down along the rivers to the south, and but still had that connection with the prairies and the Camas and the Wapato as well along the waterways.
For getting land back for Puyallup, it's been quite the journey for Puyallup and my ancestors, and then even today. Back with the 1893 Puyallup Act, they're part of there was an act that Puyallup was unfortunately made part of that allowed for the basically stealing, the literal stealing and pillaging of our lands, because the city of Tacoma was trying to become established and grow, and they were in this ludicrous battle over who was bigger and better with, city-wise with Seattle. And so Puyallup and Muckleshoot got stuck in the middle of that, I think. And so, that battle to reacquire land has been going on since 1870s. But it all came to a head in 1988, where all the atrocities and the illegal land acquisitions that were and land dealings were kind of settled out. I wouldn't know. Hindsight from 1988, was it a complete one-to-one restoration and reclamation and all that? No, I mean there was definitely the tribe was not made whole. That was kind of the beginning. That from that we were able to reassert our sovereignty, reassert our holdings on the land, and the reservation was never abolished. That's the city of Tacoma was really pushing that Puyallup didn't exist anymore. Their reservation's gone. We've stolen it. I mean, they say they sold it. We say they stole it. That's really what happened. But the 88 settlement agreement, or I think they officially call it the 1990 settlement agreement, really got the power for the tribe back, and really putting that we own the land and we need to be consulted with. And so consultation was made a requirement. There are many things I wish they would push forward for us, or forward with. First right of refusal, I think would have been something we should have really negotiated for. We didn't do that. That would have been great. I'd love to see that happen in the future as we continue to work with the county and the city and the cities. There's more than just Tacoma involved in that. All the surrounding cities are involved in that same settlement agreement as well. As far as getting land back, I know the tribe continuously is working on acquiring land that was taken, or since it was outside reservation, we've had to just go out and purchase a land on a regular basis. I'm glad that the tribe puts forth that effort. It's a real travesty, though, that especially on reservation, where we have to go and buy land that was already ours to begin with, and so we're having to. The land was sold for $1 or a couple $100, and we're being forced to buy it at a couple $1 million because the capitalism and that's just how what the world is today. But the tribe, thankfully through all of our economic developments, we have 15 enterprises that we run. We're not just a gaming tribe where we have multiple enterprises that we have, and so through our economic development, we're able to put a certain amount of funds each year into land acquisition, whether it be on res or off res. And so we're constantly working on slowly getting that land back. But I mean, close to 20,000 acres, is what we would have to get just to get the reservation back. That at current value of city of Tacoma, we're in the billions of dollars. And so It's going to take a long time to get those back, but we're slowly doing it. We have folks that are actively searching for property. Our department, the Historic Preservation Department, we actively try to find and locate lands that are important to our tribe, whether it be on res or off res. And we work with our folks to acquire those lands. Some happen, some don't, and so it's we're up against a constant tide of land developers and a housing issue and housing affordability issue, and so we're trying to get lands back so that our membership can have places to live. And the tribe just built another community. We have a bunch of small communities that we built for tribal housing, and that's a continued thing where we're acquiring land to build housing for our own tribal members, because we've pretty much been priced out of our own reservation with the cost of living around the city of Tacoma. And so if we can buy the land and make that more affordable for our membership, that's what we're trying to do. We do have a priority list of things that we do. And so we, with together with us and, with the Historic Preservation Department, our Culture Department, our land use and our planning folks, we together usually come around with places to pursue and places that would make most sense for the tribe.
I think it's important, though, I guess, to talk a little bit about where the Cowlitz Indian tribe came from before we go forward into where we are, because I think we're definitely a little behind the Puyallup and the Nisqually on that, and it's really related to the question. I think that the other question about the signing of a treaty which the Cowlitz Indian tribe chose not to do. Because we did not want to be moved away from Southwest Washington, or the Cowlitz did not want to leave their homeland, so which was what was on the table. And so rather than make that decision to be moved away from Southwest Washington, they chose not to sign. That put the tribe in a path of a long battle to fight for recognition, which they finally received in 2000. And so since that recognition and reservation in 2000, they've been actively working from that point forward. So just to kind of create, I guess, the timeline of where we are now, since that time where they got it was originally 230 acres was the reservation there in Ridgefield, Washington. From that point forward, the Cowlitz Indian tribe now has just over 1,000 acres in 7 counties in 2 states. Some of those properties are in DuPont and Tukwila, as a large volume of our Cowlitz membership lives north up in that region. So we have some health and human services programs that operate in that region. But as far as like the land back initiative, we've acquired some of that land in multiple different ways. We actually were able to receive a 20-acre piece in a land back initiative from the Capital Land Trust, that they actually transferred that land to the Cowlitz Indian tribe. It was a 20-acre parcel on the Cowlitz River adjacent to a piece of property we currently held. So we were able to negotiate that deal with them and receive that parcel. So that's one avenue of the way that we receive properties. We've done habitat restoration, large habitat restoration projects, and acquired property that way. Many different ways that I've seen over my years and time of land coming to the tribe. As far as priority of, acquisition of properties, I think, we're always looking for a benefit to members for hunting and fishing, as well as different economic, related, priorities as well as cultural values. I guess that's something to touch on. One of or a couple of the properties that we have in the Cowlitz Prairie, we have done some camas restoration work out there. We've been doing a 5-year restoration project on one of our prairies, broke the parcel into 5 separate plots, and then we've been replanting camas bulbs in each plot every year to try to get ourselves to where we can start into a rotational harvest eventually out there and have a self-sustaining camas prairie on Cowlitz Indian tribe land.
I think what people need to understand is has the area, I don't want to say dictates, but it dictates some of the stuff that they can and can't do for their tribe. Nisqually it's a bigger land base, so we can do a lot around the tribal reservation. We do buy off-site, off reservation, but I know other tribes have that difficulty because being in the cities, towns. So it is a different way of how they acquire land, why they acquire land. So that's one of the things with trying to get land back. It's kind of trying to make sure you're being, what you're getting and what you can do with it. These laws that have been created for, repatriation for the NAGPRA, some of these things come into effect to help tribes. We've had tribes that have been able to buy back land because they found burials there. I know Puyallup and I know Squaxin has had that issue where a person was trying to, build on his land, like more recreational. And then when they started digging, they found burials. And so the tribes have, been able to step in and say, you need to stop. They either acquire it by buying it or working with the landowner. So that's come into effect with tribes acquiring land, back because of the laws that were created. For Nisqually, one of the things that really hurt Nisqually was when they condemned for the JBLM. It was Fort Lewis back then. That really hurt the tribe because they took like 2/3 of the reservation, the original reservation, and in a way that wasn't right. And we talk about how long it took from letters to get from this Washington back to Washington, D.C. In that time period, things happened. A lot of tribal lands were taken this way, and I know we'll get into the allotment part of it, but there were things that were done that didn't, they were really devastating for the tribes. And so for Nisqually, when they condemned it, they had to move all the people off that were there on that side. It was Pierce County side. The tribal people told them, we have to move our dead. This is what we were up against with, government, cities or whatever, taking our land, because a lot of them would say, well, they won't, they really take care of their dead and they won't leave them. And that was how it was. You moved everything, living and the dead. So that was one of the things that I know it's affected other tribes, in the same way with the land. Tribes now with casinos, I know Nisqually has it, it's the revenue allocation, and that there is a percent that's set aside to buy land, to purchase land. So that's really helped the tribes when we were talking about casino. That's one of the things that other people don't understand is this is a part of that revenue allocation that tribes are agreeing to. And so it's helped us to be able to purchase, because that money is set aside. And then, for like the traditional stuff, it's like we've created tribal gardens, I want to just say, because they grow, traditional foods, plants, medicinal. And that's really helped bringing all that back, not just the camas, but all the other, because I remember my grandma used to go out in the woods and collect, plants and things for medicines. My mom used to go with her, but she was young, and she says, I don't remember where she took us, but I know they're out there, so it was a natural thing to go out in there. And, she said she'd just pack us a lunch and we'd go out in the woods and she would gather all of these plants and different things. So now they're doing the community gardens, tribals. So that's what they're trying to bring those back also. This land that tribes have is in trust. And in order to do certain things, depending on what you want to do, it has to be put in trust. There are other things that affect the tribes that I don't think, non-Indians are aware of, that, because I know a lot of them will say, well, how did they get that? And how did they do that? But that's what it's a part of, is when you're talking about land.
Well, land in trust is land owned by the tribe, and it's put in trust with the U.S. government. So the land is reserved by the U.S. government for the tribe. That's what the trust process means. But in order to do that, the tribe has to outright own the land in order for it to go into trust. That process is also available for tribal members, so that individual member landowners can also own pieces of the reservation and put it into trust. Those are what you need to have. There's also designations. There's also gaming trust. That's where the casinos can only be built on lands that are put in gaming specific trust lands. Other parts are economic development specific trust lands. Those are the type that we put into trust off reservation. If they're for the general welfare or the betterment of the tribe, those can be off res and put into trust as well. Puyallup tribe, for instance, we have the Woven restaurant and our seaplane operations. that's off reservation. We also have numerous fisheries, hatcheries that are off res and also in trust, off res trust. Those generally have come with the benefits of the land is not subject to taxes. But inside of the trust process, there's the fee to trust, which those are subject to taxes. So that's when you do have to pay land taxes once you're in fee, which is in the process of going into trust. In a nutshell, that's what trust is.
We've got the land buyback. That's happened. So back in the day when, I'm just going to use my family, if you did not leave a will, if my grandpa and grandma didn't leave a will, all of that land was divided among the heirs. So if you had 20 heirs, 10 acres, it was divided. As people that, and a lot of times tribal people did not do wills. I know on my family, it was really hard for them because they didn't want to talk about it. So it kept getting divided. So what happens to that is some of the people only own, like they said, like the size of a postage stamp. It was very, very little because it was divided so much. So now they've created that where they do the land buyback. So the tribe has the option to buy that land instead of it going anywhere else. And so that's a lot of the tribes, it's kind of helped the tribes to keep their traditional places, keep their land, all together, as opposed to individuals saying, well, I don't want this, so I'm just going to sell it to somebody. Or, it just, when people don't leave wills, it just keeps dividing. So they've that's one of the other things that I think has helped save tribal lands, that the tribal members are saying, like my husband, he's Montana, he's Blackfeet, and he's not planning on moving back there. So he said, I'd rather have the tribe have that land than it go anywhere else, if his children didn't want to move back there. So that was his option, to sell it back to the tribe, that it would stay within the Blackfeet reservation.
Yeah, that brings up an important point. So once it goes into trust, it stays in trust. And so if an individual tribal member owns trust property, he can only sell it to another tribal member, or it has to go out of trust, which will go back to the tribe. So, I mean, there is that little bit of an aspect to putting your land into trust as an individual landowner or an individual tribal member landowner. But for the tribe itself, it cannot sell the land. It cannot trade the land, for doing land swaps as part of mitigation and negotiation. That once it's put in a trust, the tribe cannot sell or trade that property for anything.
Like most tribes in the Pacific Northwest, tribes that are part of the Point Elliott and the Medicine Creek treaties, most tribes are really poor in land originally, post-treaty, right? Post-treaty times where land was very scarce and difficult to acquire, and land was the reason why the Medicine Creek Treaty War was actually was over land, because our new neighbors selected some locations and areas that were not very friendly to humans and were counterproductive. I mean, they wouldn't support life, and our ancestors knew that, and that was the whole basis of that Medicine Creek Treaty War, is that we want to go somewhere where if we're going to go anywhere, we want to select it. We want to go where it'll support life. And that's why the whole reason why Muckleshoot Reservation exists today, is because of our ancestral warriors and our good neighbors, our allies, Puyallup and Nisqually, and part of Yakima. That's why we're here today, and I'm so grateful every single day for what those warriors have done for our people here. This discussion about land is, sometimes it can be real delicate, because there are a lot of tribes are not as fortunate as most. I-5 corridor tribes, for one, are real beneficial for that stretch of roadway. That interstate provides a lot of customers, and it's real convenient. The post-treaty tribes recognized that and saw an opportunity. And thankfully, our elders and our elected officials, our elected leaders, then saw that and recognized that and took advantage of it. Like most good business-minded people do, that's what happened. And so we're real blessed with that savvy business concept that we were fortunate enough to capitalize on that. And so economic development for I-5 corridor tribes is real good benefit for the people. And with that economic development, we can then expand and reinvest into that deficiency of land. Some tribes, are doing a little better than others, and we're able to take that excess, take that successful economic development money and reinvest. That investment, it goes in several different directions, but land acquisition is one of them that Muckleshoot has really turned to, and it's been a real blessing, not only for for investment wise, but for treaty rights, for access, for hunting and fishing, for our basket weavers, our medicine plant people, our traditional foods people, our children. If you pay all that forward, you look forward, the benefits of this land acquisition that Muckleshoot has done is going to benefit generations of tribal members, and which I think is the main goal, the main objective here. It's not about how much we can gather and how much we can stuff away with, and we're not being greedy about it. We're being faithful to our people. We're being true to our future, our children and great-grandchildren. We want them to enjoy the same benefits that our ancestors did during the Treaty War era, the benefits of the land, the benefits of these resources, these renewable resources, when managed properly, will pay forward for hundreds of generations of people here. And I think that's the goal. It's not that we want to acquire these lands for their real estate value. The land is for access to the clam beds, access to the trout that are in these lakes, Lake Kapowsin, access to these watersheds like Wide River that were once owned and gated off by timber companies. So now we have the key. Now we have the gate, and we get to say who goes in there and who gets to harvest what. And so we're going to do it our way. If for generations, I was born in 1965, and I remember having to go around gates, find ways around gates just to go up and trout fish with my late father, just to go up and pick huckleberries with my grandmother. It used to be a real challenge to be able to get up to the hills and find those Forest Service roads that were accessible and that where a station wagon or a questionable vehicle could travel up and go gather these resources. Well, now we get to maintain those roads and maintain those gates and maintain those resources our way. And so it really has taken a turn, 180-degree turn with the acquisition of lands and resources. It's more than just lands. It's about acquisition of resources, acquisition of rights. There have been many occasions where people have been denied, turned away, locked out. Those days are long gone now. Fortunately for Muckleshoot, because of our goals and because of our leadership and because of our good fortune from investments and economic enterprises. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but in this day and age, money really does help open doors and windows if you have it. And unfortunately, that's the way this world turns now. And thankfully, our elected officials are real sharp and real business minded, and they have those skills to be able to negotiate and broker these deals that will benefit the people. Acquiring these lands is more than just owning it. We also, because tribes typically are the voice when it comes to managing natural resources. Since the Bolt decision, tribes have had a louder voice and a permanent seat at the table when it comes to managing our natural resources. And that was solidified after the Bolt decision of 1973 and 1974. So no longer will the tribes be silent when it comes to managing our natural resources. The first people and the first stewards of this land are now at the table to protest or to voice concerns or to share disagreements about how the water and the timber and the ungulates and the berries and the plants and the understory, the tidelands, we get to say now. We have to, we're going to speak on behalf of those natural resources, and hold our position, that these resources are everything to us.
I mean, the Allotment Act is one thing. The Dawes Act, that was something that the Puyallup tribe didn't really participate in. We were already that was 87. 1887 was the Dawes Act. The Puyallup tribe was already divided up in 1886, the year before, and that kind of set the stage for the 1893 Act. Dawes Act didn't allow for the sale of purchase until 1904, but 1893 is when the Puyallup Act allowed that to begin on the Puyallup Reservation. So again, that was because Tacoma was such a growing city. They wanted the land, and they wanted all that valuable timber and land base that was on our reservation. And so that 1890 and 1893 Land Act, or Puyallup Act, is what brought that about. And so a little bit different than Dawes or the Allotment Act, but kind of the same concept, except for even then their agents were assigned to a reservation who were corrupt or local businessmen, local landowners that were interested in. So they had a conflict of interest in being appointed as the agent that were supposedly speaking and representing the tribal members at the time. And so that's where a lot of our land gets taken away, is those acts and through those agents, where they're swindling and inflating or deflating the prices to increase make it cheaper for them to even buy or even flip. They would buy it low and sell high right away. But it all led to a lot of murder, led to a lot of forced marriage. That all occurred, and so it was really forcing the land out of Puyallup ownership.
Yeah, I think here at Puyallup, the Puyallup Allotment Act was really devastating. I know in the previous season, I had spoke about the disruption to the family unit, the extended family unit within our community, and essentially separating individuals onto 40 or 80 acre parcels of land and saying, now you have to be a farmer, right? Our people were water people, our people went out for sustenance. And so saying you have to build a house, plow the land, and you have to use it in that way. Otherwise, you're going to lose this land, which was not the agreement that we made when the Medicine Creek Treaty was signed, right? So the thought was that this was going to be our land forever. The reservation was going to be ours forever. And it wasn't long until, yes, development and settlement the industry itself had come into the area and really started to push back, and we were in the way. And we had some really prime, specifically around Commencement Bay, some really prime allotted land right there. And Brandon had kind of alluded to the things that had happened. And it was maybe 10 to 15 years from the time that they said, yes, Puyallups can sell their land, I think it was less than 10 years, and there was only maybe 9 families that still had parts of their allotments out of 156 allotments. And there was only 9 families that still had part of their allotment, not even a whole thing. So, it was interesting though, because when the land was sold, it wasn't like, we're going to do a deal for, you're going to buy this for such and such amount per acre, and then I'm going to get the money, right? The money went through a trust process. So it went to the federal government, and there was a big 500-acre parcel of land, which is now considered the Indian Tract here in Tacoma. So if you look at old maps and old records, or even the new ones on Google, it'll show the Indian Tract, and it was 500 acres right here next to where our headquarters is. And most of that was determined to not be needed by the superintendent of Indian Affairs here at the Puyallup Indian Trade School. So he said, 500 acres, too much land, let's sell it off, let's parcel it up. And essentially money never really came into the hands, because any of those deals that the government had to do on our behalf, they paid themselves off the top, right? So any of the services that the government provided to the Puyallup people here in the area, they paid themselves back before you ever saw a dime. So if there was paperwork related to you making a sale of an allotted parcel, the government would pay themselves for the paperwork that they had to do. So really, they're individuals, settlers are buying the allotted land for pennies on the dollar. And then the government is taking their chunk because they provided a service to that individual allottee. And so you barely saw anything. Really, they just got completely steamrolled. And there was people that were set up within our communities to be like trusted individuals, to speak on our behalf, to, hear our complaints and make sure that the government heard our complaints and they were going to, stand up for us. And it just didn't feel like that ever really happened. It was all like this big scheme to all the way down to leases before we could sell our land. There were all these leasing agreements, and they were lease to own agreements. So basically you were doing a rent to own, and it renewed every 2 years. And the way that they were written was so one-sided that it wasn't the allottee that was saying, yes, I'm going to renew this after 2 years. It was the person that was leasing that property. So they could subsequently do the lease. The allottee didn't have an opportunity to say yes or no. Once they signed that contract, it just rolled over until they were able to sell it. And then it was all because it was leased to own. Basically, they had already paid out this sum of money on that piece of property. And so you just didn't get anything. They didn't get anything out of it. So it was really, really frustrating. And I would say in terms of how the Puyallup Land Act affected us, it was detrimental. It was really detrimental to this particular region. And I think there was a lot of folks that just fought really, really hard to be able to allow Puyallups to sell their land, right? And just that 9 families. And I believe the same 9 families may still have their allotted land, but it's the same situation as Nettsie had mentioned earlier. It's like a lot of these families, it's been divided so many times over the years that, you may be able to put one house on the property, and a couple of your cousins may be able to put one house on the property, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think one of the documents we have, kind of illustrates it. So the property is worth on the port, in the was the port of Tacoma today, the property is worth $1,200. The agent said, well, it's depreciated because it's here on the tide flats, so it's only going to be worth it's only worth $200. And then after all the fees that Amber was referring to, the tribal member landowner walked away with I want to say like $85 or something like that after all the fees. So it's $200, and most of that went to fees. And so you put that in today's money, it was worth $48,000 at the time in today's money, and they got $5,000. The sale was, it's only worth $5,000 because in the tide flats, and then the person walked away with like maybe $1,000. So most of that was completely, it's was swindled out of them. And then that landowner would now sell because he got it for $5,000, and then he would turn around and sell it for 48,000. And so he profited greatly just by flipping it because of the swindling and the corruption that existed between the agents and the land buyers at the time. And most of these buyers, this was like the mayors of Tacoma, the businessmen of Tacoma, these people that are, we have bridges and names and buildings named after, and they're honored, and all this. And these are the same people that were doing this type of swindling. So when you think about, well, I won't call their names here, but it's just like you think about the bridges that we have in this city, and it's just like, wow, yeah, let's honor them. So we got one of them reversed. At least now we got it changed from L's to the Fishing Wars Memorial Bridge. So we were able to get one of the bridges renamed after one of the swindlers.
When the Allotment Act went to individual tribal members, and they chose, they were like, okay, you can't stay here anymore. So they would choose another place. Frank's Landing is a good example at Nisqually. He was up on Mutt Creek, but, he chose another piece of property. But a lot of them didn't understand. They thought it was going to be even Steven when they traded, when they went to purchase this land, that it was going to stay in trust. And it didn't, and that's how they got a lot of this land, was by them selling it because they thought it was just going to be a better place to live on. And then they found out they owed taxes. And so it was taken away from them for taxes because they didn't understand that. So that's a lot also what had to do with when they did these allotments and sold them to the individuals themselves. They weren't understanding that. So they got pretty good property and then the tribal person ended up having it taken away, because of that.
And you think about it, those are taxes that are being assessed by the state and or the county, who have no jurisdiction on a reservation. So, I mean, the taxes were even being, illegally charged to our tribe, to our ancestors who had no concept of this. Taxes and they're in some cases being charged back taxes to 1850s. It's like, what? And so they're being completely swindled out of their land.
The first time I met you, Nettsie, was I got to come up early on in my career as the lands manager and see the Nisqually garden, the community garden space there, and you gave me a tour up there. And I got to walk and see what you guys had in the vision, because we at the Cowlitz were looking to do something similar. And that was now, I think, 5 years ago or more. And I'm happy to say that based off of getting our inspiration and getting to see what y'all had going there, that the Cowlitz now has a fully functional community garden program that operates out of our St. Mary's, our elders housing facility. And in year one, we started with a 10,000 square foot garden, and we put some raised beds in for the elders to be able to manage their own garden space within that footprint, and just kind of had a plan to provide food for the daily lunch program for the elders program. And out of that, it grew as we started doing distribution to members. And in year two, we added another 10,000 square foot garden, and we added an outbuilding for them to store their tractor and the equipment they needed to man that. And we also added a 30 by 70 high tunnel hoop house. And then just this last year, we came back and added another 10,000 square foot garden space. So we're now operating 30,000 square feet of production garden space to have a full produce program for all Cowlitz tribal members that are within our areas of service, to provide them with fresh veggies and other items, culturally relevant items for distribution. We kind of modeled that after a program that we've had for almost 20 years with the tribe that we call our fish distribution program. So we have ran we pick up surplus fish from Washington State hatcheries, And for many, many years, it was ran by volunteers by a couple of brothers within the tribe that would go and pick the fish up. And if you could be there in the parking lot on the day the fish were rolling through, the members got to pick up fresh fish. And that's, we ran that for over 15 years in that model. Before COVID, we had tested a little pilot run. We worked with an outside vendor and had some of those fish filleted and vacuum sealed to try to provide access to elders that maybe couldn't clean their fish anymore, access to the fish. And we piloted it off to the elders program, and it was a hit. And then COVID came and tribal council said, do that for everyone. So it kind of kicked the fish program into full speed from that point forward. And we ran and outwore our welcome with multiple outside vendors to process all the fish that we were kicking through. But we now, through the hurdles and everything, we now run all that filleting, vacuum sealing, processing in-house. We have a full fish processing facility and have that staffed. And another demand in COVID as well was to provide fish to members no matter where they lived. In that filleting and vacuum sealing, we also started to box and do frozen shipments. And now we're serving over 1,300 tribal members all across the United States, and I think we're shipping to over 37 states. So that's kind of where the program has got to. Thanks COVID for kicking it into high gear. But yeah, all the members love it. And, and I guess with this, I will respond to that and say with all of that and with shipping to everyone, the cost of our program is we managed to keep it below $4 a pound.
Mike, he told us you guys have 3 clinics, and that's a part of this land purchasing also that creates these places, because Puyallup has the cancer center, so sometimes with this land, it's really benefiting tribal membership, and others, but, because we deal with that a lot here with descendants that can't be enrolled, but, we can help them in different ways. And so with that land base, at least you can do these things that provide very, very helpful to the tribe's health and well-being.
Yeah, and I guess just to go back on that and touch on that last point, I think I look at that as the lens of, I've lived as a dislocated tribal member for my tribe my entire life. I grew up in Southwest Washington. I've lived here my entire life. It's the only place I've ever known. And I think about the way that feeling would feel for me if I received a box with the Cowlitz logo and full of frozen fish, living in Florida and connected back to the tribe's culture and fish from the homeland, like just what that would mean. I think it's a pretty special program to be able to do that. I'm thankful to be a part of that with the Cowlitz. They're public state, Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife hatcheries that we pick up the surplus fish from now. We're still young, we're looking for hatchery opportunities and things in areas that we can get involved and start taking over as a co-manager there. We're definitely exploring those opportunities. But for now, this is kind of where we are.
Puyallup, I know we have been purchasing or have had property donated. So we have a Boy Scout camp over here close to the reservation. The land was partially donated, and then also Forterra has been helping us purchase the land and get grants and that sort of thing for it. But so we've been able to use those type of programs to help us get property and so this large camp will be used for youth programs and cultural programs. And there's opportunities to gather medicines that are in the forest. That this camp has been around for over 100 years, and so a lot of it's still original land, and so it has a lot of resources still built into it. So there's lots of opportunities for us to train and to help our youth. We have land that is donated back, the alma mater property that was here. Amber probably knows more about that if you want to hit on that one, Amber. But there's donated land that people just give back at the end. I'm always telling people, if you are, you don't have an heir or someone to pass the land back to, and you got property over here on Proctor or anywhere on in the Puyallup traditional lands, feel free to donate. There's lots of tax benefits. There's lots of real estate or estate benefits. That sort of thing. So you're more than welcome to donate the land back to the local tribe. So, but there's we have fisheries or hatcheries that we've talked about earlier, where we're able to help bring local species back and help with bring the populations of the salmon back. Hopefully in the future there is opportunities for bringing other sea creatures back up in population. So there's always ways the Puyallup tribe is always trying to return and repair the damages that have taken place over the last 200 years, whether it is through our environmental program or through our hunting program, where we're reintroducing species, or we're helping cultivate species that are nearing extinction, advocating for seal population control because of the impacts they have with the orca and the salmon. And so while they're look cute and cuddly, they're pretty vicious and wasteful. And so we're always fighting ways to help balance things out. Yes, they were a part of our natural ecosystem way back in the day, but they've become overpopulated and they're overeating, and so we need to control that population. That's important. So people get stuck on how cute they look, but they're also damaging the ecosystem, because they're so overpopulated. And so, fighting for the balance of nature is something that we're always fighting for.
There's been so many of our ancestral teachings that have really been disrupted over the last 100+ years, right? Part of having access to nature, to the waterways, to our river systems, to the culture itself, to canoe journey, to having all of this access that over the last probably 30 years has really started to ramp up, and it's so important. That's so important for the future and for our future generations to not know a time when I was a kid. I don't remember having as many opportunities to go out and harvest as we do now, to go, learn how to, or even teach others how to harvest cedar, or what does Devil's Club look like, or, going out and identifying different berries and roots and sharing that knowledge with even my coworkers. I've been able to learn over the last 10 years or so quite a bit, and share that information with the folks that I work with. And I think that, and my children, going out and doing these things, it's really an important thing for our community. And I would say that that's where those good feelings come from, right? That's what we're here to pass that knowledge. We're here to continue to learn. We're here to share that. And so when we talk about land, whether it's land owned by the Puyallup tribe, the Muckleshoot people, the Nisqually people, or if it's, if it's state land, if it's federal land, there's such an importance to, keeping and sustaining that and continuing to utilize it in a good way. The deforestation has been a real problem, and just continuing to have access. And I was watching an interview, it was Arthur Williams. So Ben Williams, one of our tribal members, he came in and he had told me about a recording that was done probably in the 80s, maybe early 90s. I think it was early 90s. And his father was in it, and it was Muckleshoot people, and they were talking about their camping and all. I mean, it was just beautiful. So being able to continue that way of life in the face of so much adversity within the natural resources is highly important to, I think, me and my family and I would hope the Puyallup people and as a whole. I also wanted to put a point of sustainability. But we have Calicia Bean, who works here for the Puyallup tribe, and she does the sustainability program. So really getting out into the community and teaching, things like composting and gardening and all the way down to teaching some of our elders how to recycle. I mean, that's a really important thing. My generation grew up recycling, and I think that, trying to make things easier within the community to be more conscious about what we're putting out there. And so the sustainability program is, my understanding is going to be, and there's been a ton of like Q&As and a ton of input from the community going into these big projects, but also like a community garden / farm, greenhouse, something. So something will be popping up in the future down here in Puyallup that I'm really excited for. And I'm hoping that we also have an opportunity to learn about more traditional plants and grow more traditional plants in this area because it's so urban. I think that's going to be pretty important. Circling to the Alma property, that was really unexpected. There was like, I know there's a restaurant there. They did some musical producing. There was like a stage. It was a business in downtown Tacoma off of, I think, Market Street. Very large, I think 30,000 or so square foot building. And that was last July 2025. That was donated to the tribe. It was given as a gift to the Puyallup people. And although I'm not sure the direction that that's going to go in, I mean, that's a downtown Tacoma piece of property, large building, a lot of potential, and a property that's probably worth quite a bit in all reality. And they decided that the Puyallup people should have it, and I think that is absolutely amazing. And so having good partnerships and working with others within the community and the broader community is so important, right? So we've come through all these hardships, but becoming a good partner within our community is highly important. And so, yeah, we were pretty excited about the gifting of that property, and we're excited to see what happens with it in the future.
The community garden, so we're kind of split in our different buckets. So the community garden operates under the Health and Human Services program under HHS. So we partnered with HHS for the garden, and then we also partner with them on the camas restoration. So they help us with the community outreach and organizing the event, and then the Natural Resource Department, we handle the procurement of the camas bulbs and show up with the labor, and we make we have an annual planting event. So we have that open and advertise that to all our members. And we normally do it in December. So the weather's really nice. But luckily our carver shows up for the event, and we have a big fire, and we bring lots of pop-ups, and we have a meal, and we make a big event of that planning. So, but like I said, that's been going on now for 5 years. We're not growing the camas ourselves, though we'd like to be, and we have retained some of that. I think it's in the works for future planning to try to incorporate more native plants into the garden space. We kind of started off originally, though, just toward food production to help supplement diets of our members. But we do want to focus more on traditional plants moving forward. We do also have some space in that section in the Cowlitz Prairie that we have the property that we're doing the camas restoration. We also have a rare prairie species called Kincaid's lupin, and we have a property that has a conservation easement on it specifically for that plant that's kind of just known on the Cowlitz Prairie there in Southwest Washington from Toledo to Boisfort. So it's a real narrow area that the plant grows, and we did work as well with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to restore that plant within the area where we're doing the camas restoration as well.
Hisquo He Shaba for joining us for the Indigenous Voices podcast. Indigenous Voices is available wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and subscribe at fortnisqually.org. This podcast is produced in partnership with the Fort Nisqually Foundation and is generously supported by Humanities Washington's Washington Stories Fund Grant and the Pierce County Historic Preservation Grant, as well as representatives from the Puyallup, Nisqually, Muckleshoot, and Cowlitz tribes. The podcast is also a partner of Washington State America's 250th. Music by Vincent Johnson from Nooksack, Lummi, and Nashani Johnson, Jamestown Slalom, and Lummi.